What's going on, guys? Marco here with Front Yard Fantasy, and I am bringing you the Baltimore Ravens team breakdown. All right, guys, so obviously they've got Lamar Jackson, and he is an incredible player, former MVP, maybe 2022 MVP. I don't know. We'll see. But he's the stud that everyone loves on this team. Mark Andrews was the tight end one last year. He's a phenomenal player. They lost Hollywood Brown, but there's a lot of things going on with this offense. And we're going to talk sleepers, breakouts, and bust. So let's jump right into it. My number one sleeper for the Ravens. And honestly, it's hard to find sleepers necessarily for all of these teams. So it's a light sleeper, and it's entirely based on his Fantasy Pros ADP right now, which is at wide receiver 37, Rashod Bateman. All right, so I think ultimately, when you look at Rashod Bateman, is he going to have a wide receiver one season? Most likely not. Is he going to have a wide receiver two season? I think that's where we can start having the conversation. I have him as a low-end wide receiver two. He could get a little bit higher depending on if we get a healthy Lamar Jackson for the whole season. If Lamar Jackson is, the Lamar Jackson we've grown to know and love, before he was in and out with the injuries and stuff last year. So ultimately, Rashod Bateman, here's the pros for what we're looking at in 2022. Coming into the NFL, he was my wide receiver 3 of all the rookie wide receivers, just ahead of Elijah Moore, just behind, I think, Jalen Waddle. And when you look at what Rashod Bateman does really well, he profiles very similar to Allen Robinson. And I know some people see peak Allen Robinson, they're like, how is he going to do that? Rashod Bateman, he's got very similar size, very similar skill set. He's a really good route runner. He's actually got a really aggressive and versatile release package, which is something you really need at the wide receiver's position, especially if you're going to be a true alpha. He can kind of play all over the field. You know, in college, his last season, he played in the slot quite a bit. He played on the outside before that, and he's a very physical player. He doesn't shy away from contact. His what he does at the catch point is pretty crazy. He's really, really aggressive. He can get up and over guys. He's one of those guys who I think he's actually like 6'2", but coming out of college, people thought he might be like 6'4", because he plays big. He plays big and he can get up. He's a very physical, gifted athlete, as well as a smart wide receiver for how young he is as a player. So that's the pros of just his prospect profile and what he's going to be able to do, hopefully, for the Baltimore Ravens. But the other thing coming out the other thing you guys got to know is that Hollywood Brown, up through, I think, week 10 of last season, he was on pace for some crazy number of targets. He was averaging 9.1 targets per game. Now, I do think that the overall passing volume for this offense will decrease. The return of J.K. Dobbins, the return of Gus Edwards, the addition of Tyler Beatty, I think that overall they are going to want to restabilize and kind of lean towards the run a little bit more. Their passing percentage jumped up by like 8 or 9% last year compared to the 3 years prior. And so it's going to drop. So I think his overall volume isn't going to be something where he's seeing 9.1 targets per game, but I think 7.4 targets per game is kind of the range. That's around 125 targets. And that's good we did the math, because that's actually where I have him for my projection on the season, is 127 targets on the season. So I think ultimately what you're looking at with Rashod Bateman is he's going to get solid volume, kind of similar to like what we've seen for like a DK Metcalf. He's going to be the wide receiver one clear for this team. He's going to really only be competing with Mark Andrews for targets. I think Mark Andrews and him will fight for targets, and that will be kind of it. They both will be these guys that kind of carry this Baltimore Ravens team. So I think Rashod Bateman, for me, I've got him as my wide receiver 24 for 2022. Sure, at wide receiver 37 in Fantasy Pros ADP, that's not a huge jump, but I think it's enough of a jump where you can still get tremendous value from that. Typically, if you're like, well, if he is a wide receiver, barely a wide receiver 2, is that really a sleeper? And I think the answer is yes, because right now he's going almost as a wide receiver 4. And so when you look at the value jump of that is something that makes it significant for me. Is he going to be a league winner? Most likely not. He has that within his range of outcomes, but it's not the most likely outcome. And so for me, like I said, wide receiver 24, he is a really, really nice value right now. And that's why he's one of my favorite sleepers, if you can call it an official sleeper for the Baltimore Ravens. All right, so let's go to my breakout, which a lot of people thought Rashod Bateman would probably be more of a breakout than anything. But my real breakout for this team is J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins is coming back from a really severe ACL tear. And we know historically, the first year could be a little bit of a slower start. But by the end of the season, those players, especially now with just the crazy medical procedures that running backs go through outside of AP, because he's a freak, he can do everything. But for a lot of these guys, by the end of that season, by the mid to late part of the season, these guys are starting to come back at their full strength. Now, we don't know if Dobbins will fully be ready for week 1. That's something you need to keep an eye on. I think he's going to be okay. He thinks he's going to be okay. He's been tweeting about it. But ultimately, if J.K. Dobbins steps onto the field week 1, right now you're looking at an RB2, a mid-level RB2 with RB1 upside weeks. And I think what a lot of people don't realize with J.K. Dobbins is that he isn't just a really good running back who can run the ball well. He can actually catch the ball out of the backfield. He didn't really have to do that. He wasn't really used that way. And the Ravens initially didn't really use him that way. But he has shown that when he is thrown the ball, odds are he's probably going to catch the ball. So I've got him projected for 30 receptions on the season, which is, I think, really close to Nick Chubb's career high. And I think I bring up Nick Chubb because I think J.K. Dobbins is going to be, when it's all said and done, Nick Chubb and J.K. Dobbins will be talked about in the same tier of pure rushing ability. J.K. Dobbins is that good. And once he is cleared for full activity, full go, he is going to show this league exactly how good of a runner he is. As a rookie, he was averaging something like 6.2 yards per carry. And while that's an insane number, I do have him averaging 5.6 yards per carry for the 2022 season. You might think, hey, Marco, that's a little crazy. That's generous. And I totally understand that. But the Baltimore Ravens have done, because of how good Lamar Jackson is, because of what Mark Andrews does, because of having a wide receiver like Hollywood Brown or now Rashod Bateman, they have created an offense that creates hyper efficient runners, whether it be Lamar Jackson, Mark Ingram, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, all of them hyper efficient runners. All of them are over 5 yards a carry as Baltimore Ravens. And I know yards per carry isn't really a predictive stat. It's not something we really lean on, but I think it just shows you how efficient consistently they are. Because this over 5 yards a carry for a lot of these runners goes back, I think, outside of last year, of course, which was a complete train wreck for most of these guys. But outside of last year, I think it goes back till 2019, 2018. So it just shows you that they have a system that produces and is built for efficient runners. And J.K. Dobbins is a very good runner. Add on top of it that efficient scheme that makes some of the lesser running backs like Gus Edwards look as good as they do. I think J.K. Dobbins is a lock to blow up in value. He is a guy who I have as a breakout because not only do I think he's going to be an RB2 with upside in 2022, but he's a guy who's going to see a huge jump in his value in your dynasty leagues. You will not be able to get him at his RB25 price tag that you can get him at right now in redraft leagues this time next year. He is going to be a top 20, top 15 valued running back because he is still really young. He is on a very good team, and he is on a team that isn't afraid to just give him the ball and let him do what he does best, which is just run it down the throats of opposing defenses. So J.K. Dobbins is my breakout. All right, and my bust, I'm going to keep it really fast for you guys. You want Lamar Jackson, you want Rashod Bateman, you want J.K. Dobbins, you want Mark Andrews. The bust is anyone else. Stop getting hyped about Devin Duvernay. Stop getting hyped about James Proche. Stop getting hyped about Tylan Wallace. Tyler Beatty even. Unless J.K. Dobbins misses time, he's a complete dart throw. And so ultimately, you want those four. Outside of those four, everyone is not, or anyone else on this team doesn't have a clear path to consistent volume who is going to be able to give you consistent wins week in and week out, even at the flex level. I think Devin Duvernay of the wide receivers is the only one that I think has a shot to be on the field fairly regularly outside or, opposite Rashod Bateman. And if Rashod Bateman's healthy, I just don't think it matters who the wide receiver 2 is on this team because this team is built to use the tight ends, the running backs, and Lamar Jackson. And of course, one wide receiver, which is what we've seen. And that's Rashod Bateman. And so if he doesn't go down, don't get excited about any of these other guys. None of them are overly talented, and none of them are going to have the opportunity. So they're all busts outside of the top 4 players on this team. Drop your thoughts below. Hit me up on Twitter at Marco_14P. I'll answer any questions you got about my video, any of my videos, everyone's videos, or your dynasty or redraft teams. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you next time. Peace.